Purple twilight was slowly descending on the small town of Concepcion, located in the heart of Paraguay. The street lamps had not yet been lit, but the first lights were already appearing in the windows of the houses. In one of these houses, a small one-story structure with chipped white paint on the walls, the light in the living room was on. The Mendieta family sat around an old wooden table that remembered the homeowner's grandmother. Paulina leaned over her son's notebook, gently correcting the small hand that clutched the pencil. Her dark hair, gathered in a careless bun, fell to her shoulders, and a faint wrinkle creased her forehead, a sign of fatigue after a long day at the library. "Mateo, look carefully. The letter R is spelled like this." She gently guided her son's hand, tracing out the correct symbol on the paper. "First stick down, then round it off." 6-year-old Mateo, sticking out the tip of his tongue with eagerness, diligently repeated his mother's movements. His dark eyes were full of determination, although it was obvious that the boy was tired after a full day at school. In the kitchen, Orlando was rattling dishes, preparing dinner. The smell of fried onions and spices filled the small house, mingling with the evening chill coming through the ajar window. Paulina involuntarily wrinkled her nose. Her husband had been oversalting his food a lot lately, as if his thoughts were somewhere far away from the kitchen. "Mom, why is the letter RR so complicated?" Mateo asked, setting aside his pencil and rubbing his tired hand. "All letters seem difficult at first, honey," Paulina replied, stroking her son's unruly black hair. "But then you'll get used to them, and they'll become your friends. Look, that little hairpin right there looks like a kitten's tail, doesn't it?" Mateo smiled, and there was a familiar, mischievous sparkle in his eyes. Paulina felt her heart clench with tenderness. At times like this, she felt especially keenly how quickly her little boy was growing up. "Dinner's ready," came Orlando's voice from the kitchen. Paulina helped her son gather notebooks and pencils. They moved to the dining room table where Orlando was already arranging plates of steaming stew. His dark uniform shirt from the cafeteria was still on, only the sleeves rolled up to the elbows. Paulina noticed a new stain on his collar, apparently from the sauce. "How was your day?" she asked her husband, putting a smaller portion on Mateo's plate. Orlando shrugged, not lifting his eyes from his plate. "The usual. Lots of orders. New waiter keeps messing up tables." His answer was short and somehow detached. Paulina felt a familiar prick of anxiety. Such answers had become the norm lately. He used to be able to talk for hours about work, about funny incidents with visitors, about new recipes he wanted to try. "And how are you doing at the library?" Orlando asked, as if having caught on. "New books were brought in today. I've been shelving them all day," Paulina began, but she was interrupted by Mateo. "Daddy, did you know that I wrote a whole line of the letter R by myself today?" Orlando smiled, but the smile seemed kind of strained to Paulina. "Good for you, son. Soon you'll be writing better than Mommy." Mateo brightened at the praise and began to eat with redoubled enthusiasm. Paulina barely touched her portion, as she couldn't get a bite down her throat. She watched her husband, who mechanically sent spoon after spoon into his mouth, obviously thinking about something of his own. After dinner, Orlando volunteered to wash the dishes. It was rare before. Paulina took Mateo to get ready for bed. While her son brushed his teeth, she pulled fresh lavender-scented linens from the closet. The simple cotton sheets were worn but clean. Paulina had always prided herself on keeping the house tidy, even with their modest income. "Mommy, tell me a story," Mateo asked, climbing under the covers. Paulina crouched on the edge of the bed. It was dark in the nursery, with only a nightlight casting a warm yellow light on the walls where Mateo's drawings hung, slightly crooked but full of childlike imagination of landscapes and creatures. "Once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a brave boy." She began the familiar ritual, but at that moment Orlando peeked into the room. "I'm leaving. I have to finish something at work, he said. Don't wait up for me. I'll be back late. Paulina froze on the half word. This was the third time this week that her husband had left in the evening, citing work. It had never happened before. The cafe always closed strictly on schedule. But Dad, you promised to teach me how to make pancakes tomorrow, Matteo exclaimed. Sorry, son. Some other time, Orlando replied and quickly left the room. Paulina heard the front door slam. There was silence in the room, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Matteo fell silent, clearly upset by his father's departure. Don't worry, sweetheart, Paulina said, trying to keep her voice sounding cheerful. Let me tell you about that brave boy. He just really liked to cook. Matteo nodded, but his eyes were already starting to droop. Paulina continued the story, stroking her son's head. After a few minutes, his breathing became even and deep. He had fallen asleep. She carefully got out of bed, adjusted the blanket, and left the nursery, leaving the door ajar. Matteo did not like complete darkness. In the empty living room, she could hear a dog barking somewhere in the distance. Her son's notebooks were left scattered on the table, the unfinished letters looking like clumsy little spiders. Paulina slowly gathered up the notebooks, folded them neatly into Matteo's school bag. She sat down in the old armchair by the window, where she liked to read in her rare free moments. Now the book lay unopened on the windowsill, her thoughts jumbled in her head, making it hard to concentrate. Something was happening to her family, something elusive but frightening. Orlando seemed to grow farther away every day. Farther away, stranger. His late returns, his excuses, his aloofness, all of it added up to a picture that Paulina was afraid to even mentally draw completely. The morning was overcast. Heavy gray clouds hung over Conception, threatening to rain at any moment. Paulina walked down the street, clutching her worn leather bag tightly to her chest. She had to be at the library by 8 o'clock, and she had gone out early, as usual, to air the room before the first visitors arrived. Orlando didn't get home before she left. His half of the bed was left untouched, as if he hadn't come over for the night at all. Matteo was still asleep when she peeked into his room to say goodbye. His neighbor, Doña Estela, would wake him up in an hour and take him to school. This service cost them 500 guaraníes a day, but it was better than leaving the child alone. The old library building greeted her with the familiar smell of dust and paper. Paulina unlocked the massive wooden door and the hinges creaked as if complaining of an early awakening. It was cool and quiet inside. Rays of morning light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating the dust specks dancing in the air. Pauline walked between the shelves, moving her fingers habitually along the spines of the books. Here was her little world, where every volume stood in its place, where there was a perfect order that was so lacking in real life. She turned on the lights and the old lamps under the ceiling slowly flared up, filling the room with a yellowish light. "Good morning, Paulina," came a voice from the entrance. It was Marisol Echeverria, her best friend who worked at the clinic across the street and often stopped by before her shift started. "Marisol, it's so good of you to come," Paulina tried to smile, but the smile came out kind of forced. Marisol noticed her friend's condition immediately. She was the kind of person from whom it was hard to hide something. It was a professional nurse's habit to notice the slightest change in a person's condition. "What's wrong? You look like you've been up all night." Marisol crouched on the edge of the old desk where Paulina was working. "Orlando didn't come home last night again," Paulina said quietly as she spread out catalog cards on the desk. "Said he was working late, but cafes never work past 10, Marisol finished for her. "Did you talk to him?" Paulina shook her head, continuing to mechanically thumb through the cards. It's like he avoids talking, always finds a reason to leave or change the subject. At that moment, the first visitor entered the library, an elderly teacher who borrowed new books for her students every week. The conversation had to be interrupted. The day stretched on slowly. Paulina did the usual work, arranging the returned books, helping readers find the books they needed, filling out forms. But her thoughts kept returning to the empty bed and the silent breakfast. Around noon, the telephone rang. The old machine on the desk rattled loudly, making Paulina wince. She picked up the receiver, expecting to hear the usual inquiry about the availability of some book. "Hello?" she uttered. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then a woman's breathing and short beeps were heard. Paulina hung up slowly, feeling a chill run down her spine. Something about the call struck her as strange and unsettling. After lunch, they brought new books, a whole box of textbooks for elementary school. Paulina began to sort through them, glad for the opportunity to distract herself from her heavy thoughts. The textbooks smelled of printing ink and were so bright and new. She imagined Matteo leafing through one of these in a couple years. "Paulina, you have a phone," a young intern who was in her second month at the library called out to her. This time Orlando's voice came through the receiver. "I'm going to be late today. I have to get the kitchen ready for the banquet tomorrow." "What banquet?" Paulina asked, feeling her heart clench. "You didn't say anything about the banquet." "It was only decided today." Her husband's voice sounded irritated. "Don't wait up for me." The connection broke before Paulina could answer anything. She stood holding the phone in her hand until short beeps started coming from it. "Bad news?" Marisol reappeared nearby, seemingly materializing out of thin air. She often stopped by during her break. "He won't come overnight again." Paulina sank into a chair. "Says some kind of banquet." "At El Paso?" Marisol frowned. "That's odd. My cousin works there as a waitress. She would know about the banquet." Paulina felt everything inside clench. So that was a lie, too. How many more lies lurked behind his words and actions? For the rest of the workday she moved as if in a dream, automatically performing the usual actions, arranging books, answering readers' questions, filling out forms. But anxiety was growing inside, turning into a heavy lump somewhere in her chest. In the evening, closing the library, she noticed a book forgotten by someone on the table. It was a novel about family life, a tattered paperback. Paulina picked it up, and a bookmark fell out of the book, an old photograph of some happy couple. She carefully put the picture back in, feeling a strange bitterness. It was beginning to rain outside. Small drops fell on the asphalt, leaving dark trails. Paulina opened an old umbrella and slowly walked home, where her son and perhaps another evening of loneliness awaited her. As she passed the El Paso Café, she involuntarily slowed her step. Through the large windows she could see the room where several customers were finishing their dinner. There was no sign of preparations for the banquet. The familiar figure of her husband glimpsed in the kitchen. He was saying something, smiling, but his companion was not visible. Paulina forced herself to keep walking. The rain intensified, drumming on the taut canvas of the umbrella. Water ran down her face, mixing with the tears she could no longer hold back. A week passed. The October heat blanketed Conception with a sweltering heat that seemed to have no escape. Even at night, the air remained thick and heavy. Paulina lay sleepless, listening to the whirring of the old fan under the ceiling. Orlando wasn't home again. She had gotten up earlier than usual in the morning. She decided to make a special breakfast. Maybe it would help to regain what they were losing day by day. Paulina took eggs, cheese, and tomatoes out of the refrigerator. Fresh bread was already on the table. She'd bought it yesterday at the corner bakery, the same one where she and Orlando had met 12 years ago. The butter was sizzling in the pan when she heard the sound of the door opening. Orlando walked into the kitchen, smelling like someone else's perfume and cigarette smoke. His shirt was crumpled and there was a lipstick mark on his collar, so obvious that Paulina felt the ground go from under her feet. "Where have you been?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Working," he answered briefly, heading towards the bedroom. "I'm tired. We'll talk later." "No, we'll talk now." Paulina turned off the stove. "What's going on, Orlando? Why aren't you home at night? Why do you smell like women's perfume?" He stopped but didn't turn toward her. His shoulders tensed as if he were preparing for battle. "You're making up things that aren't there." His voice sounded muffled. "We had a big company, lots of women. I was working. At 3 in the morning? And that explains the lipstick on your collar?" Orlando turned around abruptly, his face contorted with anger. "Stop following me! I'm working like hell to provide for this family, and you're interrogating me." A startled sob was heard from the nursery. Mateo had woken up to their voices. Paulina quickly went to her son, leaving her husband alone in the kitchen. "Mommy, why is Daddy screaming?" Mateo asked as she crouched on the edge of his bed. "It's okay, honey," she lied, adjusting the blanket. "Daddy's just tired at work. Let's get ready for school, shall we?" As she helped her son dress, sounds came from the kitchen. Orlando rattling dishes, mumbling something under his breath. Then the front door slammed. He left without even saying goodbye to his son. The day in the library stretched endlessly. Paulina tried to concentrate on her work, but the trace of lipstick on her white collar was always in front of her eyes. She mechanically arranged the books, sometimes finding herself holding the same volume for several minutes without moving. "Mrs. Mendieta," someone called out to her. She turned around. Doña Estela's eldest son was standing in front of her, holding a stack of textbooks. "You're putting the books in the wrong place. This is the history section, and you're holding math." Paulina looked at the book in her hands. Indeed, she was trying to put an algebra textbook between the ancient history volumes. Her cheeks flooded with color. "Thank you, Diego," she muttered, hastily taking the books from his hands. "I'll sort them out myself." After lunch, Marisol walked into the library. One look at her friend was enough for her to realize something was wrong. "He came in just before morning," Paulina said quietly as they took cover between the stacks where no one could hear them. "He smelled like perfume. There was lipstick on his collar." Marisol squeezed her hand. "Did you ask him?" "He denies everything. Says I'm making it all up. But I'm not blind, Marisol. I can see how he's changed. He hardly talks to me. He doesn't play with Mateo. He's always going off somewhere." "Maybe we should follow him," Marisol suggested. Paulina shook her head. "I don't want to stoop to that. I want him to tell me everything himself. I want to figure out what I did wrong." "It's not your fault," Marisol said firmly. If he's seeing someone else, that's his choice. His betrayal." In the evening, picking Mateo up from school, Paulina noticed that her son was unusually quiet. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked as they walked home down the dusty street. "Everyone at school today was talking about what they did with their dads over the weekend," Mateo said quietly. "And my dad doesn't even eat breakfast with us." Paulina stopped and squatted down in front of her son, looking into his sad eyes. "Daddy's very busy at work, honey. He's doing this for us." "But Pedro's daddy works too and still plays soccer with him." Tears could be heard in the boy's voice. "Why can't our daddy?" She wrapped her arms around her son, cradling him against her, not knowing what to say. How to explain to a 6-year-old what she herself didn't understand? A note from Orlando was waiting for them at home. "Don't expect me for dinner. Important meeting with the vendors." Paulina crumpled up the paper and tossed it in the trash. Then she pulled out a pot and started cooking dinner for her and Mateo. Her son sat at the table doing his homework, his pencil squeaking across the paper in the silence of the kitchen. "Mom, is it true that if you wish really hard for something, it will come true?" he asked suddenly. "Sometimes it comes true," she answered cautiously. "What would you wish for?" "For Daddy to be with us again," Mateo said simply, without looking away from his notebook. "Like he used to be." Paulina turned away from the stove so her son wouldn't see her tears. The soup gurgled quietly in the pot, smelling of carrots and celery, Orlando's favorite vegetables, which he now seemed to have completely forgotten. Late that night, after putting Matteo to bed, she sat in the kitchen with a cup of cooled tea. A key turned in the lock. Paulina quickly put the pictures away and got up from the table. Orlando entered, staggering. He smelled of alcohol. "Why aren't you asleep?" he asked, barely focusing his gaze on her. "Been waiting for you. We need to talk." "Again?" He waved his hand irritably. "I'm tired of talking. It's okay, it's just a lot of work." "Look me in the eye and tell me you have no one," Paulina said quietly. Orlando froze for a moment, then grinned crookedly. "You're crazy with your jealousy. I'm going to bed." He walked past her, catching her shoulder. A few minutes later, his snoring came from the bedroom. Paulina was left standing in the middle of the kitchen, feeling her world crumble, shattering like a broken mirror. The day was particularly hot, even for October. The sun was scorching the narrow streets of Conception, forcing passers-by to huddle against the walls of the houses in search of shade. Paulina walked home from work with an old umbrella to shield herself from the sun. Her legs were buzzing after a day spent between the library shelves. She decided to take the longer route through the city park, where the dense tree crowns created a semblance of coolness. Lately, she'd often taken roundabouts to get home, delaying the moment of returning to the empty apartment. Matteo was at his high school friend's house today. They were doing a nature study project together. Passing a small flower store, Paulina slowed her step. In the window were bunches of pink carnations, her mother's favorite flowers. She was about to enter the store when she noticed a familiar figure on the opposite side of the street. Orlando was standing at the entrance to the jewelry store, holding a small bouquet of red roses. He was wearing his best shirt, the same blue one Paulina had given him last Christmas. His hair was neatly combed and a smile played across his face, the kind she hadn't seen in weeks. Paulina froze in place, instinctively retreating into the shadows of the flower store awning. Her heart was pounding somewhere in her throat, her hands cold despite the heat. Maybe he'd decided to surprise her, buy her a gift to make up for the last few weeks. But that hope melted away like smoke when a young woman came out of the store. Tall, slender, with loose brown hair, wearing a tight red dress. Orlando held out the flowers to her and she accepted them with a smile that lit up her whole face. He leaned over and kissed her, not a fleeting, friendly kiss, but long, tenderly, as he had once kissed Paulina. The air around him became thick and heavy, like water. Paulina gripped the wall of the store, feeling her knees buckle. The flower seller looked out of the door worriedly. "Señora, are you feeling ill? Perhaps some water?" Paulina shook her head, unable to utter a word. On the opposite side of the street, Orlando and his companion were walking hand in hand, talking animatedly about something. The woman held roses to her chest, occasionally lifting them to her face to inhale the fragrance. They looked so happy, so in love. With trembling hands, Paulina pulled her cell phone out of her bag and dialed Marisol's number. "Can you come to my place?" Her voice sounded alien, broken. "Please." "What's wrong? Where are you?" Anxiety was audible in her friend's voice. "I'm outside the flower store on Avenida Libertad. I saw him with her." "Don't go anywhere. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Marisol showed up even earlier, out of breath, wearing a white medical coat that she'd apparently forgotten to take off when she'd gotten off work. She immediately put her arm around Paulina, who was still standing, leaning against the wall of the store. "Let's get out of here," Marisol said softly, pulling her friend toward a small cafe on the corner. "You need to sit down and get a drink of water." The cafe was empty and cool. An old fan under the ceiling was lazily chasing hot air. Marisol sat Paulina at the far table and ordered 2 cups of coffee and a glass of iced water. "Tell me everything," she asked as the waiter stepped away. And Paulina did. About the bouquet of roses, about the blue shirt, about the kiss that had made her world finally fall apart. The words poured out in a flood, punctuated by occasional sobs that she tried to hold back. "I know who she is," Marisol said suddenly when Paulina fell silent. "Her name is Rosario Valverde. She's been working as a waitress at El Paso's for about 3 months now." "You knew?" Paulina raised her eyes to her friend. "Knew and didn't tell me. I only suspected. My cousin said she saw them flirting at work, but I didn't want to tell you until I was sure. I didn't want to hurt." Paulina stared silently into the cup of cooling coffee. The dark surface reflected her contorted face. "What do I do now?" she asked finally. "For starters, stop blaming yourself," Marisol said firmly. "You've done nothing to deserve such a betrayal. And Mateo? How am I going to tell Mateo?" "Not yet. You can't. You need to talk to Orlando first. Get him to come clean. He needs to take responsibility for his actions." At that moment, a couple entered the cafe, young lovers holding hands. The girl clasped a bouquet of white lilies to her breast. Paulina turned away to the window, unable to look at their happy faces. "I can't go home," she whispered. "Not now, not after what I saw." "Let's go to my place," Marisol suggested. "I'll call Donna Estela and ask her to pick up Mateo and watch him until tonight. In the meantime, you calm down, come to your senses." Marisol's apartment was quiet and cool. Her friend turned on an old radio, from which soft music came, something sad and lingering. Paulina sat on the couch, mechanically going over the rosary beads left by her grandmother. "You know what the worst part is?" she uttered after a long silence. "I still love him. After everything he's done, I still love him." Marisol sat down next to her, taking her hand. "This will pass. Not right away, but it will pass. You're strong, Paulina. Stronger than you think you are. What if he comes to his senses? What if he realizes he made a mistake? Do you really want to be with a man who betrayed you so easily? Who chose someone else without even trying to keep your family together?" Paulina shook her head. There was a lump in her throat, but there were no more tears, only a deafening, dull ache somewhere in her chest. Outside the window, the day was slowly burning out, coloring the sky in shades of red, like the roses Orlando had given to the other woman. After that meeting at the jewelry store, every day had become an endless torture for Paulina. She noticed every little thing now: Orlando's new cologne, carefully ironed shirts that he used to hang carelessly in the closet, strange phone calls during which he left the room. That morning she awoke to the sound of the shower running. The clock read 5 in the morning, too early even for Orlando, who usually left for work by 7. Light was shining through the crack under the bathroom door and steam was billowing. Paulina lay staring at the ceiling, where the blades of an old fan rotated slowly. The sound of the water subsided. There was the sound of an electric razor, then the rustle of clothes. When Orlando came out of the bathroom, he smelled of a new perfume, tart and expensive, so different from the simple cologne he'd used before. "Where are you going so early?" Paulina asked, propping herself up on her elbow. He flinched. Apparently, he hadn't expected her to be awake. "Got a big delivery at work. Need to take delivery." A lie. Another lie. Paulina knew the delivery schedule at El Paso. They never brought in groceries before 9 o'clock. Orlando dressed quickly, not even sitting down on the bed like he'd done before. Buttoning his shirt, he turned to the mirror, and Paulina noticed a small cut on his neck. Must have been in a hurry while shaving. "You're not having breakfast?" she asked, knowing the answer in advance. "No time. I'll eat at work." He walked out of the bedroom, trying to tread softly so as not to wake Mateo. A moment later, the front door slammed. Paulina got out of bed and walked to the window. In the pre-dawn twilight, she saw her husband's figure moving quickly away down the deserted street. But instead of turning right, toward the cafe, he turned left in the opposite direction. The alarm clock in Mateo's room rang. A new day was beginning, as hard as the previous ones. Paulina mechanically performed the usual activities, preparing breakfast, helping her son dress, checking his backpack. Mateo was unusually silent, perhaps also sensing the tension hanging in the house. "Mom, why doesn't Dad eat breakfast with us anymore?" he asked suddenly, picking at his bowl of cereal with a spoon. Paulina froze at the stove where she was frying scrambled eggs for herself. "Daddy's got a lot of work to do, honey. He has to be at the cafe early. And Pedro said he saw Daddy in the park yesterday. He was with some aunt and was buying her ice cream." The spoon fell out of Paulina's hand, clinking loudly on the tile floor. The scrambled eggs in the pan began to burn, filling the kitchen with an acrid odor. "It must have been a cafe customer." Her voice sounded muffled, as if from far away. "Daddy sometimes discusses work with customers." Mateo shrugged and went back to his cereal. Childlike simplicity could sometimes be ruthless. He hadn't realized how much pain his words had caused. In the library, Paulina couldn't concentrate on her work. While arranging the books, she dropped a heavy encyclopedia on her foot twice, but she didn't even feel the pain. Her son's words rattled around in her head, mingling with the memory of the scene outside the jewelry store. Around noon, the phone rang. A woman's voice, soft and somewhat purring, asked Orlando. "You have the wrong number," Paulina answered sharply. "This is the city library." "Oh, I'm sorry." A feigned embarrassment could be heard in her voice. "He must have given me the wrong number." The connection cut off, but Paulina stood clutching the phone receiver for a long moment longer. She recognized that voice, the voice of that woman in the red dress. Rosario. Now the betrayal had a name. That evening when she got home, Orlando was already there. He was sitting at the kitchen table, looking over some papers. He was still wearing the same morning shirt, but now it looked wrinkled, and there was a fresh sauce stain on the sleeve. "I thought you had a delivery this morning," Paulina said, setting her bag on a chair. "Yes, I did." He didn't look up from the papers. "And what was brought in?" "The usual order: vegetables, meat, spices." "At 9 in the morning? Or 5 when you left?" He looked at her now, a quick, wary glance. "What are you trying to say?" "Nothing. Just wondering why you turned left when the cafe is on the right." A heavy pause hung. Somewhere in the back of the house a clock ticked, counting down the seconds of silence. "Are you following me?" His voice became low, threatening. "No, I was just looking out the window when you left, and I also know that deliveries are never before 9. Orlando stood up abruptly, his movement causing the chair to move away with a clatter. "I don't have to account to you for my every move. Maybe I had things to do before work." "What kind of errands? Buying ice cream in the park?" He froze in place. "What?" "Mateo saw you. With some aunt." Paulina almost spit out the last word. "Are you now taking her to where we used to walk with our son?" "You're out of your mind," Orlando muttered through gritted teeth. "Your jealousy is crossing all boundaries." At that moment the front door opened. Mateo had returned. He froze on the threshold of the kitchen, shifting a startled look from his father to his mother. "Go to your room, sweetie," Paulina said softly. "Daddy and I are just talking." Mateo nodded and quickly brushed past them. A minute later the sounds of a cartoon came from the nursery. He had turned on the old TV, trying to drown out his parents' voices. "I'm leaving," Orlando said, raking papers off the desk. "Work called." "No one called," Paulina replied quietly. He threw her an angry look and walked out of the kitchen. The front door slammed, for the second time this interminable day. Paulina sank into the chair where her husband had just sat. His shirt left a light trail of unfamiliar perfume in the air, mixed with the scent of a woman's perfume. On the table lay the store receipt he had forgotten. Paulina picked it up and unfolded it. It was a bill from the jewelry store, the same one where she had seen him with Rosario. The amount made her go cold, 3 months of her salary at the library. That morning, Paulina woke up with an excruciating headache. Her temples clenched like a vise, and dark spots swam before her eyes. She struggled to get out of bed. The other half of the bed was untouched. Orlando had been out again. Mateo had already left for school. It was his turn for his science report today, and he'd gone early so he could review the material with the teacher. There was an oppressive silence in the house, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the distant barking of the neighbors' dogs. Paulina tried to drink coffee, but the smell of it only made her headache worse. She called the library and told them she wouldn't be at work today, the first time in 3 years she'd taken a sick day. The elderly superintendent's voice sounded concerned. "Of course, Paulina, rest. You haven't been yourself lately. Maybe you should see a doctor?" No, I just need to get some sleep. I'll be there tomorrow for sure." After hanging up the phone, Paulina lay down on the living room couch. The old springs creaked quietly under her weight. The clock on the wall ticked, a housewarming gift from her mother-in-law. Massive, wooden-cased, it had been counting down the time of their married life for 11 years. Now every beat of the pendulum echoed in her temples. She dozed off, falling into a restless sleep. She dreamed of her wedding dress, locked in a closet, slowly becoming moldy. She dreamed of Mateo crying in an empty room. She dreamed of Orlando, but his face kept changing, becoming alien and unfamiliar. She awoke to the sound of the key turning in the lock. It was early, too early for Mateo to be home from school, too late for Orlando's lunch break. Paulina sat on the couch, listening to the sounds in the hallway. Laughter. A woman's laughter, tinkling and carefree, followed by her husband's muffled voice. Quiet, the neighbors might hear. Paulina stood up slowly. Her legs felt woozy and her mouth felt dry. She moved toward the living room door, each step difficult as if she were walking against a strong wind. There was a commotion in the hallway, laughter again, now male, and the sound of a kiss. Paulina stopped in the doorway. Orlando was pressing a young woman in a red dress against the wall, the same one, Rosario. He had one arm around her waist, the other unbuttoning the buttons on his shirt. "Orlando!" Paulina's voice sounded foreign, somehow dry and cracked. They recoiled from each other. Orlando turned around sharply, his face pale. Rosario retreated to the wall, fixing her disheveled hair. A half-smile still played on her lips, as if she hadn't fully realized the seriousness of the situation. "Paulina, you were supposed to be at work," Orlando muttered. "And you were supposed to be at the cafe," she replied in the same lifeless voice. "But instead you brought your mistress to our house, to the house where your son lives. Look, I can explain." "Explain what?" Now her voice rang with rage. "How you betrayed us, how you lied to my face, how you spent money on gifts for that. Don't you dare insult her," Orlando barked, taking a step forward. "It's your own fault. You've turned our house into a library, thinking only of books and Mateo. I'm just a money-making purse to you." Rosario tried to slip toward the exit, but Paulina blocked her way. "No, stay. Since you decided to have a date at my house, let's get to know each other better. Tell me, how long have you been sleeping with my husband?" "Yeah, I didn't know you had that kind of problem," Rosario whispered. "Orlando told me you were almost divorced." "Divorced?" Paulina laughed, and that laughter made Orlando wince. "My son left for school this morning thinking his father was staying late at work because he loves his family. And you dare come into a house where a child is growing up." "Stop your hysterics." Orlando grabbed Rosario's arm. "We're leaving now, and when I come back, we'll talk calmly." Don't bother coming back. Paulina swung open the front door. You can get your stuff while I'm at work, and leave your keys. This is my house. I paid for it. The house is registered to me. A gift from my father, remember? Get out of here. Both of you. Rosario jumped out first without looking at Paulina. Orlando lingered in the doorway. You're going to regret this. I won't let you take my son away from me. Son? Paulina stepped toward him, looking straight into his eyes. Did you think of your son when you dragged your mistress into his house, when you missed his performances at school, when he cried because Daddy didn't show up for dinner again? Orlando recoiled as if she'd hit him. He turned around and walked quickly down the hallway, catching up with Rosario. Paulina watched them until they were around the corner, then slowly closed the door and leaned back against it. The silence in the apartment became deafening. Paulina slowly sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees. Somewhere in the back of the house, a clock was still ticking, counting down the minutes of her new, ruined life. She didn't know how long she sat like that on the cold hallway floor. She only woke up when the doorbell rang. It was Marisol, alarmed at her absence from work. "Oh my God, what happened?" exclaimed her friend upon seeing Paulina's condition. "He brought her to our house," Paulina whispered. "To the house where our son is growing up." Marisol helped her up, led her into the kitchen, poured water, made her drink the sedative she always carried in her medical bag. "What are you going to do?" she asked when Paulina had regained a little of her composure. "I don't know. I need to say something to Mateo. But what? How do you explain to a 6-year-old that his father— First, you need to calm down. Mateo will be home from school soon. He shouldn't see you like this." Paulina nodded and tried to stand up, but her legs gave out. Marisol managed to pick her up, sitting her back down in her chair. "I'll stay with you," she said firmly. "I'll call the clinic. Tell them I have a family emergency. You shouldn't be alone right now." At that moment, the key turned in the lock again. This time, it was Mateo, back from school. He flew into the kitchen with a joyous cry. "Mommy! Mommy! I got an A on my report!" Paulina forced herself to smile and opened her arms toward her son. Mateo clung to her, smelling of sunshine and schoolyard, so alive and real. The only thing she had left after that terrible day. "Aunt Marisol, have you come to visit?" he remarked to his mother's friend. "Where's Daddy? He promised to teach me how to make pizza today." Paulina and Marisol looked at each other. Their friend's eyes read sympathy and support. "Daddy's really busy at work today, honey," Paulina said, glad her voice wasn't shaking. "But we can make pizza with Aunt Marisol. She knows a great recipe." Mateo grimaced a little but nodded. He had grown accustomed to his father's absence, to his unfulfilled promises. That realization resonated in Paulina's heart with a new pain. It had been 3 days since Paulina had kicked her husband out of the house. 3 days filled with heavy silences and awkward explanations to her son about why Daddy no longer lived with them. Mateo didn't cry. It was as if he had been waiting for it, as one waits for the inevitable rain in the rainy season. The morning began as usual. Paulina prepared breakfast, packed her son for school, checked his backpack. All the same activities she'd been doing for years, but now every movement was difficult, as if she were moving underwater. "Mom," Mateo called softly, picking at his bowl of oatmeal with a spoon. "I have something to tell you." Paulina turned from the stove where she was grilling herself some toast. Something in her son's voice made her wary. "What is it, sweetheart?" Mateo lowered his eyes, looking at the pattern on the tablecloth, old, stained with barely distinguishable colors that had once been vibrant. "Remember when Dad still lived with us? One day he came home with that aunt in the red dress." Paulina froze, feeling everything inside grow cold. The toast in the pan was beginning to burn, filling the kitchen with a bitter odor. "I didn't sleep then," Mateo continued, still not looking up. "It was late. but I was waiting for Papa because he promised to read me a book. They thought I was asleep." "What happened then?" Paulina asked quietly, though she already guessed what she would hear. "That aunt came into your bedroom. I heard them opening your jewelry box, the nice one where you keep your jewelry from your grandmother. Auntie kept laughing and saying, 'How beautiful. Is that real gold?'" Paulina turned off the stove with shaking hands and slowly lowered herself into the chair next to her son. Her ears rumbled and dark spots swam before her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Dad saw me at the door. He said it would be a secret between him and me, that he was preparing a surprise for you. Said if I told you, you'd be upset and wouldn't get a present." Mateo finally looked up, eyes full of tears. "I didn't mean to ruin the surprise. I'm sorry, Mom." Paulina hugged her son, pulling him close to her. She was shaking, but she tried not to show it to her child. "You didn't do anything wrong, sweetie. It was Daddy who did the wrong thing." When Mateo left for school, Paulina rushed into the bedroom. The casket stood in its place, an antique, wooden, mother-of-pearl inlaid box, a gift from her grandmother for her 16th birthday. Her hands trembled as she opened the lid. It was empty inside. Everything was gone. The gold pearl earrings she'd inherited from her mother, her grandmother's wedding ring, the chain and cross given to her at her baptism, the bracelet Orlando had given her on their first wedding anniversary. Even the simple silver jewelry she'd bought herself was gone. Paulina slowly lowered herself onto the bed. The casket slipped from her hands and fell to the floor, clattering against the wooden boards. Her mind was reeling with fragments of memories. Rosario in her red dress, Orlando's expensive perfume, the new clothes he was buying. Now everything was falling into place. She reached for the phone, dialed Marisol's number. Her friend answered after the first beep. "What's wrong?" "He stole my jewelry." Paulina's voice sounded muffled, lifeless. "Along with that, Rosario, they took everything, even my grandmother's ring." "I'll be right there," came the sound of a chair being pushed back in the receiver. "Don't go anywhere." Marisol showed up 20 minutes later, out of breath, still in her white medical coat. She found Paulina still in the same pose, sitting on the bed next to the empty box. "Tell me everything." Marisol sat down beside her, taking her friend's hand. And Paulina told about Mateo's confession, about the night visit, about Rosario's laughter. Each word came with difficulty, as if she were pushing sharp splinters out of herself. "We have to go to the police," Marisol said firmly when Paulina finished her story. "This is the father of my child. This is the thief who stole your inheritance. Paulina, that jewelry is all you have left of your family. He knew that, knew it, and he gave it to his mistress anyway." Paulina stood up and went to the window. There were children playing in the street, carefree, noisy, their laughter coming through the closed windows. Somewhere out there, at school now, was Mateo, her little boy who had been forced to keep his father's terrible secret. "You know what the worst part is?" she said quietly. "Not that he stole the jewelry. It's that he forced our son to become an accomplice to this lie, exploited his trust, his love." "All the more reason to go to the police." Marisol stood beside her friend. "He must answer for his actions." "And what am I going to tell Mateo?" "I'm sorry, honey, but your daddy's a criminal now?" "You tell the truth, that adults have to be responsible for their actions, that you can't hurt the ones you love." Paulina covered her face with her hands. Before her eyes was a picture of Orlando and Rosario in their bedroom, going through her things, laughing, trying on jewelry that held the memory of 3 generations of women in her family. "I need to check something." She perked up and went to the closet. In the back, behind a stack of old towels, lay a tin cookie box. Paulina reached for it with shaking hands. Inside were jewelry documents, old receipts, certificates of authenticity for some pieces, photographs of the most valuable pieces she'd taken for insurance. Her mother had always taught her to be prudent. "Here," She held out the papers to Marisol. It's all written down here. Every piece of jewelry, its value, its provenance. Marisol looked over the papers, her face becoming rigid. You can go to the police with this. You have proof of ownership. You have a witness, Mateo. They won't be able to turn you away. But I want to talk to him first. Paulina clenched her fists. I want to look him in the eye and hear him explain it. How he'll explain why he used our son. Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? No, Paulina answered honestly. But I have to do it. I have to at least try to understand how the man I loved for 11 years could do this to us. The next morning was overcast. Mateo woke early. She could hear him stirring in his room. He usually slept until 10 on Saturdays, but today was different. She had decided not to send him to school yesterday. They both needed time to talk. Good morning, honey, Paulina said as her son came into the kitchen, still in his dinosaur pajamas. Do you want pancakes for breakfast? Mateo nodded, climbing into his chair. He looked smaller and younger than his 6 years, as if the events of the last few days had made him shrink. Paulina began to prepare the dough, slowly stirring the flour and milk. Every movement was familiar, habitual. It helped to keep her calm. Mom, Mateo called softly, are you mad at me for not telling about Daddy and Auntie sooner? She set the bowl aside and walked over to her son, squatting down in front of him. No, honey, I'm not mad at you. Daddy put you in a very difficult position. He shouldn't have asked you to keep a secret like that. But he said it would be a surprise for you. Listen to me, Mateo. Paulina took his small hands in hers. Real surprises don't have to upset people, and true love doesn't require lies. What Daddy did was wrong. And those pretty things in the jewelry box, they're not coming back? Paulina felt her heart clench. Mateo had often seen her going through jewelry, telling stories about her grandmother and great-grandmother. Each piece held a memory of the women of their family, of important moments in their lives. I hope they come back. But even if they don't, we still have our memories. No one can steal them. The batter sizzled on the stove. The first pancake, as always, had burned. Paulina got up and went back to cooking. Mateo watched her, propping his head up with his hands. What's going to happen to Daddy now? That was the question she dreaded the most. How to explain to a child that his father had committed a crime, that he had betrayed not only her trust, but used his own son. Daddy did a bad thing, she began slowly, flipping a pancake. And he's going to have to answer for it, like when you broke the vase and confessed to me, remember? Only this is much more serious. The doorbell rang. It was Marisol. She brought fresh bread from the bakery and some papers in a large brown envelope. Hello, brave knight, she patted Mateo on the head. How about you come with me to the park after breakfast? They're selling new flavors of ice cream there right now. Mateo looked at his mother as if asking permission. Paulina nodded. Go on, sweetie. Just eat breakfast and change first. When Mateo had gone to his room, Marisol pulled papers from an envelope. I talked to my cousin. He works in a law office. Here's a list of everything we'll need for the police report. Paulina looked through the papers. The list was long. Photos of the jewelry, proof of ownership, a description of the circumstances of the theft, witness statements. Will Mateo have to testify? She asked quietly. Only if the case goes to trial. But my brother says that usually in such cases, criminals prefer to settle, especially if there are minor witnesses. Mateo returned to the kitchen, already dressed and combed. He ate the pancakes with gusto while the women drank coffee and discussed some minor news, trying not to revisit the heavy topic in his presence. After Marisol took Mateo away to the park, Paulina began to gather her papers. Every paper, every photograph hurt. Here was her grandmother's sapphire ring, which she had worn for 50 years without removing. Here was the cross, a blessing from her mother before the wedding. Here was the first gift from Orlando, the simple silver bracelet he'd bought with his first paycheck. The phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Paulina hesitated but answered anyway. "Hello, this is Rosario," the voice in the receiver sounded unsure. "Don't hang up, please. I want to talk." Paulina remained silent, clutching the phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "I didn't know about the jewelry," Rosario continued. "I mean, I knew Orlando took them, but he said you authorized it, that it was part of your divorce arrangement." "Arrangement?" Paulina finally found her voice. "What arrangement? He stole family heirlooms using our son. I'm so sorry. I'll return everything I have left, but most of Orlando's jewelry has already been sold." Paulina felt her fingers go numb. "Sold it? To where?" "I don't know exactly. He said he found a good buyer in the capital. I thought you knew." "Stop lying!" Paulina almost shouted. "You both knew exactly what you were doing. You came into my house, stole my things, forced my son to become an accomplice." "I'll get back what's left," Rosario said quickly. "And I'll tell the police everything I know. I don't want anything to do with this." The connection broke. Paulina slowly put the phone down. So the jewelry had already been sold. All that memorabilia that held their family's history was now dispersed into the wrong hands. Through the window she could see Marisol and Mateo walking down the street, both with ice cream in their hands. The son was saying something, gesturing vigorously with his free hand. He looked almost happy, for the first time in days. Paulina gathered the papers scattered across the table into a neat stack. Now she knew exactly what she had to do. For Mateo's sake, for her own sake, for the memory of those women whose jewelry had been so thoughtlessly sold, she must see this case through. The El Paso Café looked unaccustomedly empty at this early hour. A few regulars were lazily sipping coffee at distant tables. A waitress was wiping down the counter, and knives clattered in the kitchen as Orlando prepared preparations for lunchtime. Paulina pushed open the glass door. The bell above the entrance tinkled melodiously, making her wince. She'd always associated that sound with pleasant moments, family dinners, visits with her husband, Mateo's baby laughter. Now it seemed fake, like all their past lives. The waitress, not Rosario, some new girl, looked up from the counter. "We just opened. The kitchen will be up and running in half an hour." "I'm looking for Orlando Mendieta." Paulina's voice sounded unnaturally calm. "Tell him his wife is here." The girl nodded and disappeared behind the kitchen doors. A few minutes later, Orlando appeared from there, in a white chef's apron with a knife in his hand. Seeing Paulina, he frowned. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk. About my jewelry." Orlando turned pale but quickly pulled himself together. "I'm working. I don't have time for your tantrums." "Tantrums?" Paulina stepped closer. "You stole family heirlooms, used our son as a cover, and you call that hysterics." Patrons at distant tables began to listen to the conversation with interest. The waitress pretended to be very busy wiping the already clean glasses. "Let's get out," Orlando gritted through his teeth, grabbing Paulina by the elbow. She wrenched her arm away. "No, we'll talk here. I want everyone to know what kind of husband and father you really are." "Shut up," he hissed. "You don't understand." "What don't I understand? How you brought your mistress into our home, how you robbed me together, how you made our 6-year-old son keep it a secret." Her voice grew louder and louder. By now, all the visitors were already openly observing the scene. Some even stopped chewing for fear of missing a word. "Mateo told you?" Orlando clenched his fists. "Yes, he did. Can you imagine what it's been like for him all these weeks? Keeping your dirty secret, lying to his mother, believing it was some kind of surprise?" "I'll pay you back." He lowered his voice. "Just stop this circus." "Money?" Paulina laughed bitterly. "You think it's about money? It was my grandmother's jewelry, my mother's." things that have been passed down in our family for generations, and you sold them to buy gifts for your mistress." An alarmed cook looked out of the kitchen. "Orlando, we've got the billet standing." "Go to hell!" Orlando shouted. The cook hastily disappeared behind the door. "Where's my jewelry?" Paulina crossed her arms over her chest. "Rosario said you sold them. To whom? To where? What does it matter now? You can't get them back. I'll pay you. Don't you dare. Don't you dare offer me money like it's some kind of bargain. You didn't just steal jewelry. You stole the memory of my family." "What was I supposed to do?" Orlando suddenly exploded. "You turned our house into a museum. All those heirlooms, memories, stories about your precious family. And what am I? Just a cook who brings in a paycheck. And that's why you decided to get revenge, to steal what's precious to me." "I wanted to start a new life, with a woman who sees me as a man, not an ATM." Paulina recoiled as if he'd hit her. "An ATM? I've been faithful to you for 11 years, bore your son, supported all your endeavors, and you have no idea what you've done. What are you going to do?" A note of concern came into his voice. "File for divorce?" "No, Orlando. I'm going to file a police report first. I have all the paperwork on the jewelry. I have a witness, our son. I have a confession from your mistress." He turned even whiter. "You wouldn't dare. I am Mateo's father." "That's exactly why I have to do this. To let him know. You can't betray those you love. You can't steal and lie in the name of love." "You're going to ruin my life," Orlando hissed. "I'd get fired if they found out. And you ruined my family, used our son, betrayed my trust. And you know what the worst part is? You're not even remorseful." She turned to leave. There was dead silence at the tables. Even the spoons had stopped clinking against the cups. "Paulina!" Orlando called out to her. "Don't do anything stupid. Think of Mateo." She turned around in the doorway. "He's all I think about the example his father sets for him, and about how he deserves better." Paulina walked slowly down the street, feeling her knees shake. She pulled out her phone and dialed Marisol's number. "I talked to him. He didn't even try to apologize. Said he wanted to get back at me for not appreciating him enough." "Are you okay?" My friend's voice sounded worried. "Where are you now?" "Walking towards home. You know, I thought I was going to cry or scream, and there's just emptiness inside. It's like something important died." "Stay there. I'll be right there. We'll go to the police together." The Conception police station was a small 2-story building with peeling yellow paint on the walls. The old air conditioner hummed, trying to beat the October heat, but it only pushed humid air around the room. Behind the shabby reception desk sat a half-asleep duty officer, lazily flipping through some papers. Paulina and Marisol had been standing at the counter for 15 minutes, trying to explain the nature of the case, but the desk clerk didn't seem the least bit interested. "Look," Paulina began for the third time, "my husband stole the family jewelry. I have all the documents. I have witnesses." "Family jewelry?" The clerk on duty yawned. "Senora, this is an internal matter. Deal with your husband yourself." "But it's theft. He sold the jewelry without my knowledge." "Do you have proof that this is exactly theft and not, say, a family decision to sell valuables?" Marisol placed a thick file folder on the counter. "Here's all the evidence. Photographs of the jewelry, proof of ownership, witness statements." Yes. The desk clerk didn't even glance at the folder. "Fill out the application form. Leave the documents. We'll review your case on a first-come, first-served basis." "In what order?" Marisol was indignant. "There's a grand theft here. The perpetrator is known. We have all the evidence." "Next," said the duty officer loudly. At that moment, a man in a gray suit with a folder under his arm came down the stairs. He stopped, listening to the conversation. "Excuse me," he addressed the women. "I overheard your conversation by accident. My name is Ramon Ibarola. I'm an investigator. Perhaps I can help." Paulina turned to him. The investigator looked tired, but his brown eyes looked attentive and concerned. He looked to be about 45, his whiskers already touched with gray, and his forehead had deep wrinkles, the marks of years of dealing with other people's misfortunes. "Let's go into my office," he suggested, casting a disgruntled glance at the duty officer. "There you can calmly tell me everything in detail." The investigator's office was on the second floor. The small room was littered with case files, an old computer cluttered on the desk, and a cup of cold coffee standing next to it. The only window looked out onto a courtyard where police cars were parked under an awning. "Have a seat," Ibarola pointed to 2 worn chairs. "Tell me what happened." And Paulina told about her husband's strange behavior, about his association with Rosario, about the theft of the jewelry, about her son's confession. Her voice trembled, but she tried to speak clearly, without leaving out important details. Marisol silently spread out the documents on the table, photos of the jewelry, certificates, old receipts. "So your husband used the child as a cover." The investigator frowned, making notes in his notebook. "And the jewelry itself has already been sold?" "Yes. His mistress admitted that he sold them to some fence in the capital, but I don't know the details. Do you have an inventory of everything stolen, with an approximate value?" Marisol pulled another document out of the folder. "Here, we wrote it all down. The total amount is about $20,000 if you only count the market value, but some of the items are priceless. They've been passed down in the family for generations." Ibarola scrutinized the list, then looked up at Paulina. "Do you realize that if we start an investigation, your husband could face real jail time? Not only did he commit grand larceny, but he also involved a minor." "I understand," she replied quietly. "But he has to answer for his actions, if not for my sake, then at least for my son's sake, so that Mateo knows that you can't hurt loved ones with impunity." The investigator nodded and began filling out some forms. Silence hung in the office, broken only by the squeak of his pen on the paper and the hum of the air conditioner outside the window. "I'll take personal control of this case," he finally said. "There are a few points that particularly concern me. First, the use of a child. Second, the possible connection to the stolen goods resellers in the capital city. We've had information about such a network for a long time, but no leads." "What do we do next?" Marisol asked. "I'll make an official statement. Tomorrow we'll bring your husband in for questioning. We'll also need your son's statement, but I'll try to conduct it as gently as possible so as not to traumatize the child." Paulina clenched her hands into fists. "And if he doesn't show up for questioning? Then we'll issue a formal subpoena. If that doesn't work either, we'll put out an APB. But from what you've told me, he doesn't look like the kind of man who'd flee from justice." "He works as a cook at the El Paso Cafe," Marisol added. "It's unlikely he's going anywhere. It's his only source of income." Ibarola wrote down the cafe's address and Orlando's contact information, then pulled his business card from his desk drawer. "Here's my phone number. If you remember anything important or if your husband tries to contact you, call me anytime." By the time they left the station, the sun was already slipping toward dusk. It was sweltering outside, and a thunderstorm was brewing. The first roll of thunder rumbled in the distance. "How are you?" Marisol asked, looking at her friend. "I don't know," Paulina answered honestly. "I feel like I'm betraying him by going to the police, but then I remember Mateo's face when he told me about that night, and I realize I have no right to let it go unpunished." "You're doing the right thing," Marisol put her arm around her shoulders. "That investigator, Ibarola, seems like a decent man. He'll help. And if Orlando does go to jail, what will I tell my son? The truth, that his father did a bad thing and should be punished, that love is no excuse for betrayal and lies." They walked slowly down the street as the storm clouds thickened overhead. The first heavy drops of rain fell on the heated asphalt, hissing, evaporating. Paulina clutched the investigator's business card in her pocket, a small rectangle of cardboard that could change their lives forever. "Is Mateo at your mom's right now?" Marisol asked. "Yes, she picked him up after school. I didn't want him to see me like this after talking to Orlando and going to the police. Let's go to my place. We'll have some tea, calm down, and then I'll take you to your mom's to pick up Mateo." Paulina nodded, feeling infinite gratitude for her friend. She couldn't have done it without Marisol, wouldn't have found the strength to confront her husband's betrayal, wouldn't have dared to go to the police. The morning shift at the El Paso Café was in full swing. The smell of fresh pastries and coffee wafted up the street, attracting customers. Orlando was standing at the stove, preparing another order, when the entrance bell rang particularly loudly. The room was suddenly quiet, unusually quiet for this time of day. "Orlando Mendieta," came a loud voice. He turned around, still holding the spatula in his hand. Standing in the kitchen doorway was Investigator Ibarola, accompanied by two uniformed police officers. Their appearance seemed to stop time. The waitresses froze with their trays. The cooks stopped chopping vegetables. Even the fan over the stove seemed to spin slower. "Yes, that's me." Orlando slowly placed the spatula on the table. His hands, accustomed to the precise movements of a cook, trembled faintly. "You need to come with us to the station for a statement. We have a report of a theft committed by you." The patrons at the tables began to whisper. Some even rose from their seats to get a better view of what was happening. A young waitress dropped a tray of dirty cups. The clinking of broken dishes sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. "There's some mistake here." Orlando tried to smile, but the smile came out crooked. "I didn't steal anything. We have all the evidence, including witness statements." Ibarola spoke calmly but firmly. "You can come with us voluntarily, or we'll be forced to use harsher measures." The cafe manager, a small, nervous man in a rumpled suit, popped out of his office. "What's going on here? Orlando, what's the problem with the police?" "Your cook is suspected of stealing a large amount of jewelry," Ibarola explained. "In addition, there's a charge of involving a minor." "Mateo?" The manager turned pale. "What does that have to do with a child?" "He used his son as a cover for the theft." One of the policemen pulled out his handcuffs. "Mr. Mendieta, are you coming with us?" Orlando slowly removed his apron. His face turned gray like cooled ash. He looked around the kitchen, the place where he had worked for the past 8 years, where he knew every corner, every pot, every knife. "Let me at least change my clothes," he asked. "My change of clothes are in the locker." Ibarola nodded but sent one of the policemen with him. 5 minutes later, Orlando returned in his usual clothes, still as pale and confused. The waitresses huddled in a group at the entrance to the kitchen, whispering about what was happening. One of them, the new girl who had seen the scandal with Paulina, wiped away her tears. "She warned him, right here in the cafe, said she'd report him to the police." "Quiet," the older waitress told her. "None of our business." The manager was rushing between the police and the kitchen, trying to calm the customers and organize the remaining cooks at the same time. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the inconvenience. The kitchen is still running. Your orders will be ready on time." But the visitors did not pay attention to the cooling coffee and uneaten dishes. All eyes were fixed on Orlando, who was being led by the police to the exit. He walked slowly, with his head down, as if he had suddenly aged 10 years. At the very doors he stopped, turned to the manager. "Tell Rosario, tell her I—" "Come along," Ibarola interrupted him, gently but insistently nudging him toward the exit. The car moved off, taking Orlando to the station. The crowd gradually dispersed, returning to their business, but a sense of drama hung in the air. At this time, Paulina sat in the library, mechanically arranging books on the shelves. A telephone call made her flinch. "We have your husband in custody," Ibarola informed her. "He refuses to testify without an attorney, but he seems to realize the gravity of the situation." What did he look like? Paulina herself didn't know why she asked that. Confused, frightened, didn't seem to expect things to go this far. And Rosario, was she there? No, she wasn't at the cafe, but we'll find her. She's an important witness in this case. Paulina thanked the investigator and hung up. The library was quiet. Only the rustling of the pages of the books the old reader in the corner was turning. That familiar sound had always soothed her, but today even it seemed foreign and wrong. Marisol showed up at lunchtime, bringing sandwiches and a thermos of tea. "I heard the news. The whole town is just talking about it." "Mateo. How am I going to tell Mateo?" Paulina pushed the untouched sandwich away. "He's at school now. What if the other kids already know, if they tease him?" "Let's pick him up early," Marisol said firmly. "We'll explain everything calmly, at home. He's a smart boy, he'll understand." Understand that his father is a thief, that he used him to steal, that he's in police custody now? No. He'll realize that sometimes even the people closest to him make mistakes, and that mistakes need to be answered for. At that moment, an elderly woman, a regular reader who took stacks of love novels, entered the library. When she saw Paulina, she shook her head. "Oh, my poor dear, I know all about it. Such a shame. But you hold on, my dear. My first husband turned out to be a scoundrel too, but you see, I survived, and you will survive." Paulina smiled forcefully. "Thank you, Donna Clara. What book did you want today?" No, I just came by to show my support. The whole town is on your side, remember that." As the reader left, Marisol quietly cursed. "This is how gossip begins. Now everyone will feel obligated to speak out." "Let them talk," Paulina replied tiredly. "I only care about Mateo." A gray Tuesday morning found Paulina at the police station. She sat in Investigator Ibarola's office, clutching a cup of cold coffee in her hands. An envelope of money lay on the desk. Orlando had finally agreed to return the value of the jewelry he'd sold. "Here's everything." Ibarola spread the papers in front of her. $21,000. He sold part of his share in the cafe to raise that amount. Paulina stared at the envelope, hesitant to take it. That money couldn't replace her grandmother's ring, her mother's cross, all the memorabilia that was now lost forever. "He's willing to plead guilty," the investigator continued. "If you agree to withdraw the plea, the case can be closed. Otherwise, he faces a real sentence." "And Rosario, what about her?" "She returned what jewelry she had left, 2 pairs of earrings and a bracelet. She's also agreed to testify against your husband if the case goes to trial." "Can I talk to him?" Paulina asked quietly. Ibarola nodded and left the office. A few minutes later he returned with Orlando. He was gaunt from the 3 days he'd spent in the holding cell, dark circles under his eyes. The cook's uniform shirt he'd been held in was wrinkled and lost its whiteness. "Paulina." He stopped at the door, hesitant to come any closer. "Why?" She looked up at him. "Why did you do it?" Orlando sank down in his chair, hunched over, looking at his hands, the hands of a cook, used to creating, not destroying. "I don't know." His voice sounded muffled. "Things just kind of spiraled. Rosario saw pictures of the jewelry, said it was beautiful. Then she started saying that you don't wear them anyway, that you keep them in a box like a museum. And I wanted to give her a gift, to show her that I could. And Mateo, why did you bring our son into this? He wasn't supposed to wake up. We thought everyone was asleep. And when he saw us, I panicked, said the first thing that came to mind about the surprise." Paulina shook her head. "You betrayed not only me, but his trust. forced our child to become an accessory to theft. I know, Orlando covered his face with his hands. I ruined everything, but I got the money back, every last peso. Maybe we can start over. Start over? Paulina grinned bitterly. What about Rosario, your new life you were talking about? She left. As soon as the trouble with the police started, she disappeared. Didn't even pick up her stuff from her rented apartment. Is that why you came back? Because she left you? Orlando was silent. A heavy silence hung in the office, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. I'm withdrawing my statement, Paulina finally said. Not for your sake, for Mateo's sake. He's been through too much already. Thank you, Orlando exhaled. I swear I'll make it right. No, she stood up, taking an envelope of money from the table. You can't fix anything anymore. I've filed for divorce. The papers will come to you next week. Paulina, please. You can see Mateo. He loves you no matter what. But it's over between us. She turned to the investigator. What do I need to sign? Ibarola silently handed her the papers to withdraw the statement. Her signature, clear, decisive, put an end to the matter. Walking out of the station, Paulina stopped on the porch. The day was overcast but sweltering. The rainy season was approaching. Children played in the square in front of the building. An ice cream vendor rang his bell. Women with bags returned from the market. Normal life went on as if nothing had happened.